So, hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Ngakpa ö-Dzin. Welcome to Aralin Cardiff. This is Ngakpa ö-Dzin, who is going to be the main teacher this evening. And this is the second of 3 teachings on liberating emotions. If you missed the first one and you're here tonight, then you can catch up on that on our YouTube channel. So that's Aralin Cardiff. Just search for that on YouTube and you should be able to find the video there. If you want to ask a question, please use either the facility under the participants list of putting up your hand, and that flags on my screen that you have a question, or type your question into the chat box and then I will put it to Ngakpa ö-Dzin at an opportune moment. And just to let you know that these teachings are being recorded. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Ngakpa ö-Dzin.
Thank you very much. I thought I'd begin with a quick recap of the previous teachings and see if any questions have occurred to anyone in the meantime before going on into the main topics of this teaching. So last time we spoke about emptiness and form being non-dual, and this being our misunderstanding or understanding of this being the entire reason for the problems that we have in terms of our emotions, because we see ourselves as real in terms of being solid, permanent, separate, continuous and defined, and because we see that in the outside world and we believe that form can be made reliable, ultimately reliable, then we act towards reality in a way in which it doesn't exist, and therefore we find aspects of that somewhat disappointing or frustrating. If we realize non-duality, there'd be nothing else for us to do, because that's how things are. So that was the teaching last time in a nutshell, and then there are various ways of expanding upon that in order to give us something to grasp and something to practice with. And so the teachings that we are looking at now are the poetic symbolism of the color and element view of Tibetan Tantric psychology. So have there been any questions relating to? No. Okay. So what we're looking at now is a representation for the sake of analysis and understanding of our emotional world in terms of the elements earth, water, fire, air and space. And they're given associated colors of yellow, white, red, green and blue. So they come like that, and they have other qualities associated with them, which we'll go into in more detail shortly. For an enormous work on this, you could read Spectrum of Ecstasy by Ngakpa Chögyam, which goes into this in enormous detail. So with each of the elements, as I say, it's split into these elements for the sake of analysis and understanding. We don't actually exist as single elements. All the elements and all the possible emotions are at play in us at any time, maybe with some dominating and some not so obvious, but they're all present. But we break things down in order to be able to understand them a little better. Because we approach reality with this misunderstanding of ourselves and this misunderstanding of form and emptiness, it means that each of the elements and emotions comes with a primary misconception of reality. So how are we misunderstanding reality? And then a coping strategy. How do we deal with our misunderstanding of reality in terms of aberrant emotions? And then, as we mentioned, I think last time, we are never entirely separated from our liberated qualities, and our difficult emotions are never entirely separated from their realized qualities. And so as we look at each of the elements, we can look at how our emotions misbehave in terms of those elements, but also within each of those emotions is the seeds of its own liberation. So as we said before, Buddhism is very optimistic in its presentation. There's a way out of our entanglement always. So if we look at each of the elements in turn and look at how they behave, both in terms of the natural world and in terms of our emotional life as well. And I think this is one of the really rich aspects of this set of teachings, is that as well as being a set of teachings for us to look at and practice with, we've got the daily possibility of learning from the elements themselves in seeing how they appear and how they behave, and relating that to how our emotions are at work. So for this mythical caricatured person who is the earth element neurotic, this is someone who feels insubstantial, that their reaction to non-duality is that the empty quality of non-duality makes them feel hollow and insubstantial. The reaction to that is to wish to be more, have more territory, wish to have more form, and to engage in making oneself bigger, prouder, and more immovable, to become fixed and to become obdurate and stubborn. The natural elements, element of earth, as you can see in mountains, which are huge, immovable, and dominate the surrounding landscape. So the person who feels hollow and insubstantial, their reaction is to want to be like that, to want to actually dominate whoever or whatever is around them. As we say, it's a misunderstanding of how reality is, but this misunderstanding has triggered that emotional reaction, if that is one's elemental bias. So all of these emotional reactions undermine themselves, because what we do in response to our inaccurate perception of the world is going to fail. If it's based on some kind of peculiar fantasy rather than being based in reality, at some stage it's going to fail. So in the natural world, there are not only mountains being forced up by continental movement, but there's also erosion, in which the rain gradually strips mountains of pebbles at first, and then maybe entire avalanches of rocks. The work that created the mountain in the first place gives rise to earthquakes, which create an insubstantial quality within the ground itself. From an emotional perspective, we can look at this in terms of empire building. If we feel that we don't have enough territory, we want to gain more in some way. And this could be the empires established by countries, or it can be the empires that people or companies try to establish in order to make them feel more secure. And if we look at empires and how they function, you start with a small country that wants to feel secure, and so it takes over a few countries around it. This is a problem immediately, because you've then got more neighbors, as well as possibly internal strife as well. And you still feel a sense of insecurity. So the only way of approaching that is to take over a few more countries so that you're bigger and you're stronger. You carry on in this fashion, and your borders are getting bigger. You're gaining more neighbors who actually don't particularly like what you're doing. And if you stretch an empire big enough, not only does it have lots of neighbors nibbling away at it because you can't possibly manage to patrol those borders, but you start to get internal splitting as well, because the person that you've put in charge really doesn't have the capacity to manage the whole affair. So the empire will gradually crumble from the inside because of internal strife and get nibbled away by the barbarians from the outside. So because we've based our whole approach to our feeling of hollowness and insubstantiality on the need to take over more and more territory, eventually insubstantiality will occur, simply because that's what happens if we pursue that particular approach. As well as the failure to reach any point of safety and security via that approach, what we can also look for is what is there within the earth element, if that is our particular current dominating emotion. What is there in the earth element that actually contains liberated qualities? Because this liberation of these emotional qualities occurs when we're no longer doing what we're doing for me. Because if there's no me to feel hollow and insubstantial, what is there in terms of the earth element? There's just energy. And that energy has the feeling of equality, equanimity, and generosity. Because we're not trying to make it do something it can't do, because we're not trying to make it shore up a sense of hollowness, then that energy can be free, and it can offer itself to whoever needs the territory, whoever needs the richness, whoever needs whatever we have to offer. So within all of that trouble is the possibility of liberating that energy. So there was nothing wrong with the energy itself. There's nothing wrong with the energies that we have within our being. It's just this misconstruction and the desire to support the mythical me that actually distorts that energy. And as soon as we can even begin to change that view, then more things become possible. So we, instead of trying to establish territory, we find that even lack of territory is workable ground. And we don't actually need to establish any territory in order to exist as complete human beings who can offer whatever they have to other people. As I said at the beginning, are there questions?
There is a
yes?
question,
Yeah.
if now is good.
Yeah.
This is from Peter. Does this symbolism / representation also apply to systems in general, such as in your example of the empire, or is it rather for individuals?
I would say that it is both, that we can see it in what human beings do by themselves, what human beings do when they gather together in groups. But really, the only place we can practice with it is in ourselves. So we can make a difference to ourselves through practicing in terms of this symbolism. And at other times, maybe we can only just see it in action. But by seeing it in action in the outside world, either with countries, companies, football teams, almost anything you like, we can see that as a reflection of ourselves in some fashion. But we can only practice in terms of who we are and our own emotional makeup, I would say.
He's nodding.
Thank you. I'm talking to you here, but I'm actually talking to a device on a stick in this room.
Only I can see it well.
So it's strangely disconcerting. So we've looked at the earth element. I'm trying to keep each of these elements to a time slot here. So that they neither get too little nor too much, because I don't want them to be jealous of each other. So if we look at we can come back to any of this, and there can be questions at any time. So if we look at ourselves, I suppose, in terms of the water element, the water element, I think I missed out a bunch of interesting symbolic information about the earth element, which you'll find in much more detail in Ngakpa Rinpoche's book, but it's associated with the color yellow, which has got a sense of like cornfields and ripeness and fruitfulness. The direction is the south. The time is mid-morning, where the day is full of all possibilities, and the season is autumn. So we're back to that season of fruitfulness and generosity. But there's a lot more to this symbolism if you have the chance to read up on it. If this inspires anyone in any way to take a look at this, it would be very good to read Rinpoche's book. The water element is a person who feels threatened, where the threat itself is direct and obvious. That over there is threatening me over here. Whatever it might be, it could be a word, it could be a gesture, a glance, a physical attack, whatever. But there it is. It's really obvious. This is how we perceive what's going on. It may not be real in the sense that there was one, but if we feel that we've been attacked, that's enough to trigger the water element response. And the water element seeks security through attacking the source of the threat. So if you look at the natural element of water, you can see how it could be lashing down as spitting rain that's really stinging, or it could be freezing solid into jagged pieces of ice. So there's the possibility there of hot anger or cold anger in this this symbolism, depending on how an individual reacts. So the only security is through attacking. What this does is raise the energy of threat, raise the energy of anger, and so going from what might have been a glance to harsh words, what might have been harsh words to a physical assault, what might have been a physical assault to thermonuclear war. These are, strangely, all on the same continuum. That if we have anger, we're somewhere along that line. It could be very small, it could be enormous, but it's somewhere along that line. Now, what happens in terms of that anger, that fear of obliteration, that fear of being threatened, is that through acting in that way, we raise the level of threat, possibly to a destructive level. So an example might be the gunslinger from the Western movies, or it might be a hired hitman, but it's someone for whom the target is there, but they make themselves the target as well by the way they act. And there's something about the water element that has the sense of simplicity and clarity about it. What's to be done is obvious. What might be happening to you is also obvious. So that there's that clear simplicity. And so if you are the hitman or gunslinger, either you die or they die, and it's that simple. There's nothing complex or abstract about the nature of the water element. So in a similar, well, not in a similar way, but similar to the earth element, there is that sense that if we act in this way, if we act from our fantasy of being under threat, then eventually we create a real threat that is sort of self-confirming and possibly self-destructive at the same time. Now, again, within the element, there are also clues to its realized or liberated nature. If we no longer have this self that feels threatened, then we have clarity of vision and luminosity. And so we can offer that clarity of vision to any given situation as soon as we stop trying to protect ourselves from perceived threats. So once again, everything becomes workable as soon as we're not attempting to relate everything back to me. This is the fundamental cause of our problems, is relating everything back to me. And going back to the earlier question, that me might be me singular, but that me might be me in this group of other me's, because I'm gathering together with a group of other people who are like me. But again, it's all part of the same project of looking after me. So instead of anger and aggression, we have the possibility of this sense of clarity about the situation. The water element is very, very intelligent. While we're busy getting angry with other people, we remember something really nasty and hurtful that we can say that relates to something that was spoken about 15 years ago. And we can bring that to mind in an instant and bang, it's out there. So it sharpens the intelligence, but it's actually the energy that is available to us all the time. It's only that we're engaging with it because we're angry, but it's all still there. It's all still part of the same energy. And as soon as we're not using it in that aggressive style, we have the memory, we have the clarity that we can bring to bear to any situation. In terms of colors and times and landscapes, the water element is white, the direction is the east, and the time is dawn, when everything is quite clear. And the landscape, you can see the landscape as being a landscape of snow, where there's not a lot of detail, but everything is completely clear, and you can hear sounds that have traveled great distances because they're not muffled by anything in between. And the season is winter.
There's the question. Peter again. Self-destructive and self-confirming at the same time. Does this apply to all the elements? Is this emptiness and form at work?
In a sense, you could say yes, because each of these inappropriate responses confirms itself that I do what I'm afraid of, and what I'm afraid of seems to then happen. So that's the self-confirming, but what I'm afraid of is what I didn't want to happen, and so it's also self-destructive. And it all starts from just having this wrong perception. And if we can just start to niggle at ourselves a little bit in terms of how we are seeing things, then we can start to loosen that up a bit. And so we can maybe, even if it means taking a bit more time before we react to anything, just give it a bit of space. And this is where we come back almost inevitably to having a meditation practice, because the space that we discover in terms of our silent sitting practice becomes the space that we have within ourselves in order to loosen the tightness with which we cling on to things. So it all begins from that little seed of a misapprehension of reality. I call it a little seed. It's what we're doing all the time for a lot of us. It's our entire perception. And this was one of the interesting aspects of the teachings on emotions, because I always thought the teachings on our bad emotions would be about actually getting rid of them. But because the emotion is the end result of a misperception, what we then look at instead is, what is that misperception? And what was the energy before we turned it into an emotion? And so there's a lot of value in the energy that exists, and we're just twisting it. So liberating the emotions is actually unwinding, undoing what we're doing to the emotional energy rather than getting rid of it. So if we've got emotions on the go, as soon as we can see how they function, as soon as we can see what we're doing to put that twist in there, then we can start to relate with the energy of the emotion itself and the qualities that can provide us with. Fire element. fire element is almost considered the spirit of the age in some ways, because the fire element begins from this misperception, begins from the misperception of what's going on in terms of non-duality, and is someone who feels isolated, alone, and in need of company, maybe, but in need of unification is the main drive there. So they seek security with unifying with an item, a person, whatever it might be. I won't feel any better until I buy whatever it is. So there's a sense of consumerism there. And I think consumer in this case is a really good word for it, because through seeking our security, seeking to overcome isolation, in terms of, say, we go out and buy something, or maybe we don't go out at all, but we buy things, and then some nice person actually delivers us a parcel, and ooh, it's arrived. We've bought the thing that is going to make our lives wonderfully better, and there's this brief hovering moment as we unbox this wonderful thing, computer, camera, pair of trousers, whatever it might be, that is just the really wonderful sparkling thing that we saw online, and then we unify with it. It's now ours, and it's a short hop from it being ours to being mine to being me. I have unified with this pair of trousers. Look, I've got these trousers on. And then that's it, because it was that moment of unification that we desired, just that moment. And so while we're tracking the parcel in transit from Amazon or via Hermes or whoever you've got going, we can actually follow it. Look, it's getting closer. The van is just up the road, and there's all that wonderful sense of anticipation. Or even better, there's been a delay. Sorry, we couldn't dispatch it because we couldn't get the parts or whatever. Ooh. And then we stretch out this process of anticipation because we know we're defined by that process of anticipation. But eventually it arrives. We feel satisfied for this moment of unification. I bought a new camera a couple of weeks back. And it was interesting to feel this sense of the camera's out there somewhere, but it's coming towards me. And it was delayed. And it's interesting to feel this sort of stretching cord. What's going on here?
Especially as you'd got rid of the other cameras to afford to buy this camera. So he's bereft of cameras for a few days.
Traded in four cameras to get hold of this thing. But it's interesting because once you can start to feel the energy that's involved, it becomes a bit more playful. There is that sense of loosening up a bit. You think, oh, look at this, I'm watching this happen. And you can do that with all the elements. Once you've got a bit of space around them, you go, ooh, look at this, I'm doing this. So the item, whatever it is, we've unified with it. And if we are a card-carrying, signed up, fully subscribed, fire element neurotic, it's gone. Like the fire itself, if you look at the behavior of the fire element in nature, it consumes. And it's either in the grate at home, if you're fortunate enough to have a fire, or it's outside and leaping from tree to tree as people trying to put out the fire. But eventually it consumes everything it can and goes out. all that's left is ash. And that is the nature of that kind of desire. If we have that sense of isolation and the need to unify with something, as soon as that moment of unification occurs, all that's left is ash, gone. And so we reignite the desire, or first of all, we reignite the sense of isolation, because what we bought has disappeared. Even though it's still there, it's disappeared in terms of that moment of unification and anticipation. And so that sense of isolation rearises, and we have to go back to the catalogue or the online shop or whatever it is, and something else catches our eye, and we wait for the moment of unification with that. And so again, we have the self-fulfillment. I feel isolated. I'm buying this thing. Oh, I feel isolated. And there's that self-fulfillment and self-destructive aspect of the fire element. In terms of what's it like if you have the fire element at work, but it's no longer having to serve oneself and a personal sense of isolation? Well, like any fire, it's warm. It makes connections with other people, with other things, and is equally at home in terms of directing items to other people as it would have been in terms of directing items towards oneself. There's as much joy in there as seeing somebody else consume whatever it was as there would have been in having it for oneself at that moment. In fact, there's more joy there in terms of directing people to things towards other people's needs, because we're not defined by it, but we can act in that way. So within the those aspects of the neurotic fire element, there's actually the source of liberation and realization. So yeah, if we take the example of consumerism, and if we can look at the way the natural element of fire works, then we can see how they are very similar in terms of being what seems to be the way things work at the moment. I know there are people who are trying to slow down or stop certain aspects of consumerism because we've seen the way it's ripped through natural resources. So that's going back to the question, is it out there or is it in here? Well, it's out there and in here. If we can do something about what's in here, we might be able to do something about what's out there and how that's working. So the fire element is red, and it's associated with the West, and it's associated with springtime, because you can actually see, you can actually feel the energy in the trees, the plants and flowers at this time of year, when they're actually practically explosive. A flower is like some sort of slow-mo firework. It's just, and tracing them through the spring and into the summer is quite amazing to watch how the flowers just burst open. So it's associated with the springtime and what's it? And sunset. That was the other thing. And there's a sense of sort of glorious richness about the fire element at sunset, and the richness of the landscape that's highlighted by the setting sun. And so if we go on now to, if we go on now to
I was going to say 2 more elements coming.
The air element, one of my favorites, the air element. The air element is what's triggered by someone who feels groundless anxiety. This is different to the water element, where the threat is obvious. This is the feeling that something might be up that is actually to our detriment, but we don't know what it is. And so there's this feeling of anxiety, and then in order to try to develop a sense of security, what do we have to do? We've got to investigate. We've got to investigate everything because we don't know where the threat is. So we gradually develop the means of trying to watch everything, because anything might be a source of threat, and interpret things in our environment as if they might be the cause of that threat. And this develops, if we let it run, into full-blown paranoia. Something's out to get us. It could be anything. It could be everything. So from the seed of groundless anxiety, it can just explode out into absolute paranoia and aberrant behavior. If we look at the air element itself, the air element has this quality of visiting everything, every little nook, cranny and detail in whatever. When the wind is blowing, it visits every surface that it comes into contact with, whether it's a brick wall, or a little channel within the brick wall, or a crack in the wall, whether it's a tree, a branch, a twig, a leaf. It is visiting everywhere. Nothing is left alone. So this is the sense with which we visit every little detail, perhaps smaller and smaller little details, infinitely, in order to discover more about the situation. So an example of such aberrant behavior is if you were to become suspicious of your partner. If this little sense of anxiety develops into, perhaps they're up to something. And well, what do? You've got to investigate. You can't come out with it. I mean, if they were up to something, they wouldn't admit to it anyway.
I'm always up to something.
Absolutely. I never quite trust you. And so they're writing an email and you're trying to squint a glance at who it might be to. You want to remember what their passcode is on their phone, so you could have a little look at that. In the old days, you'd be steaming open the envelopes or whatever it might be, because you think there's something there, and you want to confirm that somehow. You want to know for sure that there isn't anything there. But while the sense of groundless anxiety exists, it doesn't matter how much you find out that seems innocent. Maybe it's all well disguised. It just shows how good they are at these dreadful things that they're up to, that I haven't found anything yet. They're definitely up to something. They're really good at covering their tracks. I found nothing. This shows that they're definitely up to something, and they're very good at it. But what happens when you have squinted at their emails, steamed open the envelopes, you've got a private investigator following them wherever they go, is that they start to think you're acting a bit oddly. And maybe they get a bit fed up with this. And they think, I'd probably be happier elsewhere. And so, once again, the anxiety in this case, and how we act as a result of that, in terms of our suspicion of somebody else's behavior, leads them to the behavior we might have been suspicious of in the first place. So we fulfilled our assumption that they might be thinking of leaving us. and we've destroyed what it was we hope to make secure. So that sense of security through investigation has undermined itself. The liberated quality of the air element is self-accomplished activity. There's an awful lot of energy there, an energy that's prepared to go in any direction that it needs to go in, and something that will investigate as necessary whatever details there are in order to make a success of an event, a project, whatever it might be. So if we're an air element neurotic, all that energy is there waiting for us to stop being neurotic about it, to actually think, I don't need to do all this. I can just let that aspect go, and the energy is there. And it's called, interestingly, it's called self-accomplished activity, not because it will necessarily be successful in the sense that everything you do comes out right, but it's self-accomplished in that it no longer has to refer back to base. It no longer has to fulfill any need to prop oneself up in any way. It can just get out there and do what needs to be done as best it can. So all that energy is there, all that energy is available to us if we have this particular neurosis at work, as soon as we let go of me needing to be protected through investigation. The air element is symbolized by the color green and the north. And it's the summertime where things are fairly busy in terms of nature, and dusk where things are rabidly busy in terms of the rooks nesting in the trees, or clouds of mosquitoes gathering under the trees. There's an awful lot that's going on, and with the dimming light of dusk, it's very difficult to see what's happening. So you can see that the aspects of the air element are there in the natural world in terms of how they might be perceived. But of course, if you don't have that sense of anxiety, this is just play, and everything is doing what it's doing. And the fact that you can't see in the twilight is actually not a bother at all. What the mosquito does is the mosquito's own business. And what the rooks are on about by barging each other off branches, that's up to them. So how we perceive the situation is entirely down to us. If we see it as, oh, it's a bit gloomy, there could be something in the gloom that threatens me, I need to go and investigate. Or if we can let things be as they are, that's entirely up to us. I think there's also a sense within the air element of simply not being able to police everything, not being able to watch everything. If I'm watching this person over here in any level of detail, this person over there is up to something, and you can't scan that fast. So in another way, it also undermines itself simply because it can't be done. And eventually it collapses. So if we engage with the liberated quality of the air element, we have a huge amount of energy that we can actually use for something useful to others and helpful. And with the space element, the space element is an element in itself, and is also an element in which all the other elements play. So to some extent, the space element can be the result of us failing in terms of all the other elements, because the space element is associated with bewilderment. Nothing works. I don't understand what's going on. I can't make any of the other elements work for me. I don't know what's going on. I'm completely bewildered. And when the world starts to seem too big and too incomprehensible, and none of our strategies have worked, then the reaction can be to try and make our world smaller. Try to simplify things down to an understandable level. I'm never leaving the house again. It's all too big out there. Mind you, these days, people not leaving the house is possibly a sign of good mental health. I don't know. But the house, the garden, it's all a bit big, isn't it? And the plants are growing in an incomprehensible fashion. I think I'll stay in the house. And as we make our world smaller, we've inverted the earth element problem. The world outside is just getting bigger the whole time. And if we take to our beds with full-blown depression, the world outside is just more and more massive and overbearing. Now, this arises because we think we should be able to understand everything, that everything should be comprehensible. And that lack of comprehension and seeing that as a problem in itself has driven us to this point where we are trying to make the world small enough that we can understand it. If we don't have that as a problem, if we don't have a problem with space, we don't have to intellectually understand everything. And we can just be open, completely open to what's happening anywhere, at any time. And so the sense of being overwhelmed by the incomprehensibility of everything is liberated through not actually having to understand everything and just being open about our entire situation. The times and places of the space element are anywhere, anytime, any season, because the space element includes all the others. So it doesn't take such an amount of description or talking about it. It's all completely there, completely open, and the possibility of realization is ever present within the space element, and the possibility of realization is ever present within all the elements. So I've got 3.5 minutes remaining. So what I was going to do at this point is suggest some homework. No, not really. I feel that all Buddhist teachings come with the optional possibility of homework. And the optional possibility of homework is actually to do with understanding what's been taught, seeing how it can apply, and in this case, as it's 2 weeks before the next teaching, or if you're watching this on video, 5 minutes before the next teaching, then there's time to play with some of what we've talked about today. So in terms of the natural elements, if you've got any time or any opportunity, I'm sure you will have, especially if you're out there walking up a mountain in the rain, you've got a chance to see how the natural elements behave and see that as symbolic of our own emotional elements, our own emotional comings and goings. And then within our own emotional life, you can maybe look at how our reactions to situations relate to the elements, and how they might exist if they're neurotic reactions of any sort. They might exist in terms of trying to create security for this sense of the permanent me. So if you want to, you could maybe have a look at that, because then in the next teaching, we could maybe see how that's been, see if any questions have arisen before we bring this series of teachings to a conclusion. So thank you very much for your time and for being here today.
Thank you very much, Ngakpa ö-Dzin. That was wonderful. And thank you for joining us all this evening. As Ngakpa said, the recording will go up on the Aralyn Cardiff YouTube channel. We will be back at Facebook Live tomorrow evening for our meditation and yogic songs session. So if you would like to join us for practice tomorrow, that would be wonderful. That's 6 o'clock at Aralyn Cardiff, 6 o'clock UK time, Aralyn Cardiff's Facebook page. So thank you again. Thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again. Good night.